I sacrificed everything for my daughter. I spent 15 grueling years working offshore, sending every dime back to buy her a beautiful home and secure her future. But when I finally returned, I didn't find a pampered college student. I found my little girl scrubbing floors in her own house. They say that a father's job is to protect his family, but nobody tells you that, sometimes, to protect them, you have to leave them behind. My name is Arthur. 15 years ago, my life was a smoking crater. The 2011 recession had completely wiped out my small construction business in Ohio. I was drowning in debt, working 3 dead-end jobs just to keep the lights on, and my marriage to Brenda was dissolving into a toxic, screaming mess. Brenda was always a woman who craved the finer things in life, and when the money dried up, so did her affection. The divorce was brutal, but the only thing that truly mattered to me was my 7-year-old daughter, Rosie. Rosie was my light. She had these bright green eyes and a laugh that could cure the worst day. When the judge finalized the custody agreement, Brenda got primary custody because I was practically homeless. Sitting in that cold courtroom, looking at my little girl crying because her daddy had to pack his bags, I made a silent vow. I swore I would never let her know the sting of poverty. I would build an empire for her, even if it killed me. 2 months later, I took a contract with an international offshore drilling company. It was the most dangerous, soul-crushing work imaginable, months at a time, isolated on rusted metal platforms in the freezing North Sea, followed by blistering rotations in the oil fields of Saudi Arabia. I missed birthdays. I missed Christmases. I missed the school plays. But the pay was astronomical. Within 3 years, I had completely wiped out my debt. Within 5, I had saved enough to do something drastic. I contacted my lawyer, an old friend named Thomas Harrison, and I bought a stunning 5-bedroom house in Crestview, one of the most affluent suburbs in the state. I paid for it entirely in cash. But because I was constantly overseas and wanted to ensure Rosie had a stable, beautiful place to grow up, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I allowed the house to be placed in a conditional trust. Brenda and her new husband, a slick local car dealership manager named Greg Sullivan, were allowed to live there rent-free. The catch? The house was legally Rosie's the second she turned 18, and, in exchange for living there, Brenda agreed to put the $4,000 in child support I sent every single month directly into Rosie's college fund and living expenses. Arthur, you're handing a gold mine to a woman who took you for everything you had, Thomas had warned me over a crackling satellite phone. It's not for her, Tom, I replied, staring out at the endless, churning black ocean. It's for Rosie. She gets the good school district. She gets a backyard. She gets a safe neighborhood. I can endure this rig as long as I know my little girl is sleeping in a castle. For the first few years, things seemed fine. Brenda would send me photos of Rosie in front of the house, smiling in her new school uniforms. But as the years dragged on, the communication started to shift. The Skype calls I eagerly waited weeks for became less and less frequent. Brenda always had an excuse. She's at a friend's sleepover, Arthur. You know how teenagers are. She's at cheer camp. She left her phone at home. She's studying for finals. She really can't be distracted right now. I was working 18-hour shifts, bone-tired, sweating blood in the desert sun. I didn't have the energy to fight Brenda from 6,000 miles away. I convinced myself that this was just a normal teenage phase. Kids grow up, they pull away from their parents, especially the ones who aren't there. But I never stopped sending the money. I sent extra for a car when she turned 16. I sent extra for graduation dresses. When Rosie turned 18, Brenda told me she had decided to take a gap year, staying at home to do online courses before heading to a private university. I bought the lies, hook, line, and sinker. I thought I was being the ultimate provider. I thought I was a hero. I had no idea I was funding a nightmare. My body finally gave out when I was 52. A minor cardiac event on a rig off the coast of Dubai, served as a massive wake-up call. The doctors told me I needed to stop, or the next one would put me in a box. So, I took my early retirement, packed up my 15 years of exile, and boarded a flight back to the United States. I didn't tell Brenda I was coming. I didn't tell anyone, except my lawyer, Thomas. Rosie was 22 now. In my mind, she was either finishing up college or working a great entry-level job, living comfortably in the Crestview house that was now legally hers. I envisioned a tearful reunion. I bought her a beautiful vintage gold locket from a market in Dubai. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to Crestview. It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-July. The neighborhood was just as pristine as I remembered, from the brochures, manicured lawns, massive oak trees, luxury SUVs parked in wide driveways. When I pulled up to the house on Maple Drive, my chest tightened with pride. The white brick was immaculate. The garden was perfectly landscaped. There was a brand new Mercedes and a sleek Audi parked in the driveway. My daughter is living like a queen, I thought to myself, wiping a stray tear from my eye. I walked up the stone pathway, my hands actually shaking with nerves, and rang the doorbell. It played a soft, melodic chime. I waited. I could hear footsteps echoing on hardwood floors inside. The lock clicked, and the heavy oak door swung open. The smile froze on my face. Standing in the doorway was a young woman, but she looked nothing like the polished, thriving college student I had pictured. She was wearing oversized, faded gray sweatpants and a ragged t-shirt stained with bleach. Her hair was thrown up in a messy, frayed bun, but it was her physical state that made my breath catch in my throat. She was incredibly thin, almost fragile, with deep, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands, God, her hands were raw, red, and cracked. Clutching a heavy plastic bucket filled with cleaning supplies and a scrub brush, she looked up at me with exhausted, guarded eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. For a terrifying second, I thought I had the wrong house. But then I looked closer. Beneath the exhaustion, beneath the pale skin and the defeated posture, I saw the exact same bright green eyes I had said goodbye to in that cold courtroom 15 years ago. "Rosie?" I choked out. The name scraped against my throat. She blinked, her brow furrowing in confusion. She looked at my weathered face, my graying beard, my travel-worn clothes. Do I know you?" "Rosie, it's me," I said, my voice cracking completely. "It's your dad. I came home." I saw the exact moment the realization hit her. Her eyes widened, the green suddenly pooling with tears. Her lips parted, trembling, but no sound came out. The scrub brush slipped from her red, calloused fingers and clattered onto the porch tiles. She took a hesitant step forward, as if she was looking at a ghost. "Dad?" she whispered, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. Before I could reach out and pull her into my arms, a sharp, piercing voice echoed from the top of the grand staircase inside the house. "Rosie, what the hell is taking so long?" A girl appeared at the top of the stairs. I recognized her immediately from the few Facebook photos I had seen over the years. It was Brittany, Greg Sullivan's daughter from a previous marriage. My stepdaughter. But she wasn't acting like a sister. Brittany marched down the stairs wearing designer leggings and a silk top, holding a half-empty smoothie. She looked perfectly tanned, pampered, and furious. "I told you the guest bathroom needs to be deep cleaned before my friends get here in an hour," Brittany snapped, completely ignoring me standing in the doorway. "And when you're done with that, my Audi needs to be hand-washed. Greg said you have to do it today because you scratched the rims last time. Why are you just standing there? Who is this guy?" I stood frozen, my blood turning to absolute ice. I looked from Brittany, dripping in wealth that I had paid for, back to my biological daughter, who flinched at the girl's tone. Rosie immediately looked down at the floor, her shoulders hunching in a posture of complete submission. "I'm sorry, Brittany. Rosie mumbled, hurrying to pick up the scrub brush. I'll go do it right now. I was just, I don't care what you were doing, Brittany sneered. Just do your job. You know the rules. You don't eat until your chores are done. The world seemed to stop spinning. The sounds of the suburban neighborhood faded into a deafening silence in my ears. Do your job? You don't eat until your chores are done? I looked at Rosie's clothes again. I looked at the dark circles under her eyes. I looked at the mansion I had purchased with 15 years of my sweat, my health, and my absence. I slowly stepped over the threshold, pushing the heavy oak door wide open. "Excuse me?" Brittany snapped, finally looking at me with disgust. "You can't just walk in here. Who the hell are you?" "I'm the man who owns this house," I said. My voice wasn't a yell. It was a low, dangerous growl that echoed through the massive foyer. I stepped between Brittany and Rosie, shielding my trembling daughter with my body. "And I want to know why my daughter is dressed like a peasant cleaning your toilets." Brittany's arrogant smirk instantly vanished. She took a step back, her eyes darting nervously toward the kitchen. "Mom!" Brittany suddenly shrieked, her voice pitching into a panicked squeal. "Mom, get out here!" Footsteps clicked rapidly against the kitchen tiles. Brenda rounded the corner, wiping her hands on a pristine linen towel. She hadn't aged a day, no doubt thanks to the thousands of dollars in living expenses I had been wiring every month. She was wearing a cashmere sweater, a massive diamond ring on her finger, and looked every bit the wealthy suburban socialite. "Brittany, sweetheart, what is all the yelling?" Brenda's voice trailed off. She stopped dead in her tracks in the middle of the hallway. The linen towel slipped from her perfectly manicured hands, landing softly on the gleaming hardwood floor. All the color instantly drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax mannequin. We stared at each other in complete silence for 5 agonizing seconds. I saw the absolute naked terror dawn in her eyes as she realized the golden goose hadn't just come home. He was standing in the foyer, and he had seen everything. "Hello, Brenda," I said, stepping further into the house I had bought, locking the front door behind me with a loud, definitive click. "We need to talk." The heavy click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot in the silent foyer. Brenda practically jumped out of her cashmere sweater, her eyes darting toward the front door, and then back to my face. "Arthur," Brenda stammered, her voice high and reedy, devoid of her usual arrogance. "Arthur, what are you doing here? You didn't tell us you were coming back. You should have called." "I can see why you'd prefer a warning," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. I didn't take my eyes off her. I reached out and gently placed my hand on Rosie's trembling shoulder. She flinched at my touch, a reaction that sent a white-hot spike of pure rage straight through my heart. I softened my grip, keeping my hand there as an anchor. "What is going on here, Brenda? Why is my daughter dressed in rags, scrubbing floors for your spoiled brat?" "Now wait just a minute," a loud, booming voice interrupted. Greg Sullivan, Brenda's husband, swaggered out from the formal dining room. He was wearing a fitted polo shirt, a gold watch glinting on his wrist, holding a crystal glass of scotch. He looked exactly like the sleazy car salesman he was, just older and fatter. "You can't just barge into our home and start throwing accusations around. Rosie helps out around the house. It builds character. She's earning her keep." "Her keep?" I repeated, taking a slow step toward him. "Her keep? I bought this house in cash 15 years ago. It's been legally in Rosie's name since her 18th birthday. I've sent you $4,000 every single month for 15 years to ensure she never had to lift a finger for anything other than her education. Where is the money, Greg?" Greg's arrogant swagger faltered, his eyes shifting nervously to Brenda. Brenda stepped forward, trying to force a sickly sweet smile. "Arthur, let's just calm down and go into the kitchen. We can explain everything. The economy has been tough. Raising a child is expensive. Rosie made some mistakes. She dropped out of her classes. We had to teach her responsibility. I ignored Brenda and turned to my daughter. Rosie was staring at the floor, tears silently streaming down her hollow cheeks, her raw hands clutching the fabric of her stained sweatpants. "Rosie, look at me," I said softly, crouching down slightly to catch her eye. "Sweetheart, look at Dad." Slowly, she raised her head. The absolute brokenness in her green eyes was devastating. "Did you drop out of college?" I asked. Rosie let out a ragged sob. "Dad, I never went. They never let me go." "What do you mean they never let you go?" I asked, my blood running cold. "I paid for it. I sent the tuition money 3 years ago when you graduated high school. I saw the acceptance letter to the state university." Rosie shook her head frantically, shrinking away from Brenda and Greg as if they were going to strike her. "They told me you stopped sending money," she wept, the dam finally breaking. "When I turned 18, Mom sat me down. She said you got fired from the oil rigs. She said you went bankrupt and abandoned us. She told me the house was going into foreclosure and that the only way we could keep a roof over our heads was if I worked to pay off my share of the debt. They took my phone. They sold the car you bought me and gave the money to Brittany. They said if I tried to leave, they'd throw me on the streets and I'd have nothing." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the hallway. I stood up slowly. For 15 years, I had baked in the Arabian sun. I had missed every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. I had almost died on a rig off the coast of Dubai, all so my daughter could have a beautiful life. And these parasites had stolen it all. They had intercepted my money, funded their luxury lifestyle, bought Mercedes and Audis, and convinced my daughter that her father was a deadbeat so they could turn her into an indentured servant in her own home. "Arthur, she's lying!" Brenda shrieked, panic entirely consuming her face. "She's a pathological liar. She always has been. She has mental issues. We've been trying to treat her." "Shut your mouth," I said. It wasn't a yell, but the sheer venom in my voice made Brenda snap her mouth shut instantly. "Show me your room, Rosie," I said gently. Rosie nodded, wiping her face, and led me away from the grand staircase. We didn't go upstairs where the master suites were. We didn't go down the hall to the beautiful guest rooms. Instead, she led me to a narrow door near the kitchen, the door that led down to the unfinished basement. I followed her down the wooden stairs. The air grew damp and cold. In the corner, next to the roaring furnace and the water heater, was a single mattress on a concrete floor. There was a cheap plastic dresser, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a small stack of books. There were no windows. There was no heat. This was where my daughter had been living for the past 4 years, while Brittany paraded around upstairs in designer clothes. I stood in that dismal concrete cell, and a tear finally broke free, rolling down my weathered cheek. I had built her a castle, and they had locked her in the dungeon. "Rosie," I whispered, pulling her into my arms. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before collapsing against my chest, wrapping her arms around me and sobbing uncontrollably. I held my little girl tightly, feeling her ribs through the thin, ragged t-shirt. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry I wasn't here. But I swear to you, it ends today. They are going to pay for every single tear you've cried." When we walked back upstairs, the dynamic in the house had completely shifted. Greg was pacing the living room, whispering furiously into his cell phone. Brenda was standing by the kitchen island, biting her nails, while Brittany looked confused and annoyed on the sofa. "All right, pal, you've had your little reunion," Greg barked, trying to regain control of the situation as I walked into the room. "You can take her and get out. We don't want her here anyway. But this is our house. Brenda's name is on the trust documents as the primary caretaker. You abandoned your family for a decade and a half. You don't get to just waltz back in here and make demands." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. "You're right about one thing, Greg," I said, dialing a number I knew by heart. "I don't make demands. I let my lawyers do that." I put the phone on speaker and set it on the marble kitchen counter. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Thomas Harrison speaking. Tom, it's Arthur. I'm at the house in Crestview. Arthur, welcome home, my friend. Thomas's voice echoed through the kitchen. How was the reunion? Did Rosie love the locket? Tom, we have a major problem, I said, staring dead into Brenda's terrified eyes. Brenda and Greg have been embezzling the child support. They never sent Rosie to college. They've been keeping her in the unfinished basement and using her as a domestic servant. They told her I went bankrupt and abandoned her. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Thomas finally spoke, his friendly tone was entirely gone, replaced by the razor-sharp precision of a ruthless corporate litigator. Arthur, Thomas said coldly, are you telling me that Brenda Sullivan has breached the terms of the conditional trust? Absolutely. Brenda lunged forward. Arthur, please, let's just talk about this. You don't have to bring lawyers into it. Tom, I continued, blocking Brenda with my arm. Greg just claimed that this is their house because Brenda's name is on the caretaker documents. Clarify the legal standing for them, please. Gladly, Thomas said, his voice dripping with legal authority. Brenda, if you can hear me, you might want to sit down. 15 years ago, Arthur purchased that property outright. The deed was placed into a conditional trust. You were permitted to reside there rent-free under 2 strict conditions. Clause A. You were to act as a custodian for the property until Rosie's 18th birthday, at which point the deed automatically transferred to her sole name. Clause B. You were legally obligated to apply all financial support directly to Rosie's welfare, education, and medical needs. Greg's face turned bright red. She's 22. If the house is in her name, we have squatters' rights. You can't just kick us out. Actually, Mr. Sullivan, I can, Thomas replied smoothly. Because you are currently residing in a property owned solely by Rosie without a formal lease agreement, you are legally considered guests. And since Rosie is the sole proprietor, she can revoke your invitation to be on her property at any time. Furthermore, because you have committed gross financial fraud by misappropriating over $700,000 of international wire transfers, which, by the way, constitutes multiple federal felonies, the original caretaker agreement is retroactively null and void. Greg dropped his scotch glass. It shattered against the hardwood floor. Arthur, I am dispatching the local police to your location right now to assist with a trespasser removal, Thomas continued. I will also be contacting the FBI field office in Columbus tomorrow morning to hand over the 15 years of wire transfer receipts we have on file. They will be conducting a full forensic audit of Brenda and Greg's bank accounts. Thank you, Tom. See you tomorrow, I said, ending the call. I looked at the 3 of them. Brittany was now crying hysterically, finally realizing that the endless well of money she had been living on had just permanently dried up. Greg looked like he was about to have a heart attack, his chest heaving as he stared at the broken glass on the floor. Brenda was sobbing, falling to her knees on the expensive, imported rug. Arthur, please, Brenda begged, crawling toward me. Please, don't do this. I'm your ex-wife. We share a daughter. Don't send us to prison. I'll pay you back, I swear. Greg's dealership is doing well. We can take out a loan. You stole my daughter's youth, I said, my voice completely devoid of pity. You stole her education. You destroyed her self-worth so you could buy designer clothes and fancy cars. You have exactly 15 minutes to pack whatever fits in your precious Audi and get out of my daughter's house before the police drag you out in handcuffs. The next 2 hours were chaotic, loud, and incredibly satisfying. When the Crestview police arrived, Greg tried to play the victim, claiming it was a domestic dispute and that I was an intruder. Unfortunately for Greg, I had the original deed, the trust documents, and Rosie's driver's license proving her identity and ownership of the property. The officers informed Greg that he and his family were officially trespassing. When Greg started screaming and aggressively shoved one of the officers, the situation escalated rapidly. He was immediately slammed against the hood of his own Mercedes, handcuffed and arrested for assaulting a police officer. Brenda shrieked as she watched her husband get shoved into the back of a squad car. Brittany, forced to carry her own heavy designer suitcases out to the curb, threw a massive temper tantrum, screaming that she had nowhere to go and that her life was ruined. I stood on the front porch with Rosie, my arm wrapped tightly around her shoulders, watching them load their lives into the trunk of a car they would soon have to sell to pay for criminal defense attorneys. As Brenda got into the driver's seat, she rolled down the window and looked at Rosie one last time. "After everything I did for you," Brenda spat, her true, venomous nature finally exposed. Rosie, who had been quiet and terrified all afternoon, finally stood up straight. She looked down at the woman who had abused and manipulated her for years. "You did nothing for me, Mom," Rosie said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Get off my property." So, Brenda peeled out of the driveway, leaving black tire marks on the pristine concrete. And just like that, the cancer was gone. The aftermath was a long, difficult process, but it was a journey we took together. The FBI forensic audit revealed exactly what we suspected. Greg's car dealership was failing, and they had been using my child support to keep his business afloat and fund Brenda's luxurious lifestyle. Because the money crossed international borders, they were charged with federal wire fraud. Greg was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Brenda took a plea deal to avoid jail time, but she was hit with massive restitution orders. Last I heard, she was living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of town, and Brittany was forced to drop out of her expensive private college and work the drive-thru at a local fast food restaurant to pay rent. As for Rosie and me, we started over. The first thing we did was take all of Brenda and Brittany's leftover furniture out to the front yard and set it on fire in a massive bonfire. We painted the walls, changed the locks, and turned the house into a real home. I used the remainder of my retirement savings to get Rosie the best trauma therapists available. It took months for her to stop flinching when a door slammed, and even longer for her to realize that she was allowed to eat whenever she wanted, sleep in a warm bed, and just exist without having to earn it. 2 years later, Rosie enrolled in the State University to pursue a degree in child psychology, wanting to help kids who had survived abusive environments. I walked her to her first class on a crisp autumn morning. She was wearing a beautiful wool coat, a bright smile, and the vintage gold locket I had brought her from Dubai. I lost 15 years of my daughter's life, and I can never get that time back. But as I watched her walk onto that campus, confident and free, I knew that every blistering day on those oil rigs, every lonely night in a foreign country, had been worth it. I built an empire for her, and God help anyone who ever tries to take it away again. If this story of a father's relentless love and ultimate justice moved you, please make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life stories. Hitting that notification bell helps us bring you more unbelievable tales of betrayal, revenge, and redemption every single week. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Arthur? Let us know. And thanks for watching.